What happens when a high school tries to crush a dream? When they try to ban a brilliant popular black student from her own prom just weeks after she was nominated for prom queen. They thought they had all the power. They thought they could use dusty, forgotten rules and quiet backroom deals to enforce their prejudice. They never counted on her mother. They didn't know she was a force of nature who wouldn't just fight the system, but buy it out from under them. This isn't just a story about a prom. It's about a mother's love, a community's stand, and the moment a cancelled event became a crowning achievement. The town of Northgate prided itself on its picturesque charm and progressive ideals. Manicured lawns lined quiet, tree-shaded streets, and hate has no home. Here signs dotted the yards of historic colonial houses. It was the kind of town that had a farmer's market every Saturday and a town-wide picnic on the 4th of July. At the heart of it all was Northgate High, a sprawling brick institution that was, by all accounts, a good school. It boasted high graduation rates, a championship-winning lacrosse team, and a long list of alumni who had gone on to Ivy League universities. In her senior year at Northgate, Makia Johnson was one of the school's brightest stars. She wasn't just academically gifted, consistently pulling top grades in her AP classes. She had a genuine spark that drew people to her. She was the vice president of the student council, a peer tutor for underclassmen, and a volunteer at the local animal shelter. Her smile was infectious, her energy boundless. Makia moved through the crowded hallways of Northgate High with an easy grace, navigating the complex social ecosystems of jocks, artists, and academics with a kindness that seemed almost effortless. She had a knack for making people feel seen, for remembering small details about their lives, and for offering a word of encouragement when it was needed most. Her mother, Victoria Johnson, was the source of much of Makia's strength and confidence. A formidable woman in her own right, Victoria had built a successful event planning business from the ground up. She was known throughout the tri-state area for her meticulous attention to detail, her flair for the dramatic, and her unwavering professionalism. Victoria had orchestrated lavish weddings, high-profile corporate galas, and exclusive charity fundraisers. She was a master of logistics, a shrewd negotiator, and a creative visionary. She had taught Makia the importance of hard work, integrity, and above all, knowing one's own worth. Victoria had moved them to Northgate when Makia was starting middle school, drawn by the promise of a top-tier education and a safe, welcoming community. For years it seemed to be just that. Makia blossomed, and Victoria's business flourished. They were one of a handful of black families in their affluent neighborhood, a fact that was rarely acknowledged, but always present like a low, steady hum beneath the surface of daily life. Victoria had navigated the subtle and sometimes not so subtle slights with a practiced poise, always shielding Makia from the worst of it. She attended the parent-teacher conferences, donated generously to school fundraisers, and charmed the other mothers at back-to-school nights, all while maintaining a certain protective distance. The trouble began, as it so often does, with something good. It was a Monday morning in late April when the nominations for the senior prom court were announced over the school's crackling PA system. When Makia's name was read aloud as a nominee for prom queen, a cheer erupted from her friends at their corner table in the cafeteria. Makia's face flushed with a mixture of surprise and genuine delight. It was a silly tradition she knew, a popularity contest that meant little in the grand scheme of things. But still it was a recognition from her peers, a sign that she was not just accepted, but admired. She texted her mother the news, adding a string of smiley face emojis. Victoria's reply came back almost instantly. "That's my girl. See, all that hard work and kindness pays off. We have to find you the perfect dress. Love you to the moon and back." Micaiah smiled, tucking her phone away. She felt a warm glow of happiness settle over her. It was senior year. The finish line was in sight. College acceptance letters were in, summer plans were being made, and prom felt like the final glittering jewel in the crown of her high school experience. She looked around at her friends laughing and talking excitedly about dresses and dates, and felt a profound sense of belonging. She was blissfully unaware that her nomination had landed like a stone in a calm pond, sending ripples of discontent through a small but powerful segment of the Northgate community. Across town, in a sun-drenched kitchen that smelled of fresh brewed coffee and entitlement, Brenda van der Zee was reading a text from her own daughter, Ashley. "Mum, you are not going to believe this. They nominated Micaiah Johnson for prom queen." Brenda stared at the phone, her perfectly sculpted lips tightening into a thin line. Brenda was the unofficial queen bee of the Northgate parent community. Her husband was a partner at a prestigious law firm, and she served on the boards of half a dozen local charities. She drove a pristine white Range Rover, wore tastefully expensive athleisure wear, and believed her opinions were not just valid, but essential. Her daughter Ashley, a girl who had inherited her mother's ambition, but none of her cunning, had also been nominated. For Brenda, this was not a high school tradition. It was a birthright. She immediately forwarded the text to her inner circle, a group of wealthy, well-connected mothers who viewed the school system as their personal fiefdom. There was Carol, whose husband was a real estate developer, Sarah, a stay-at-home mum married to a hedge fund manager, and a few others who shared their worldview. Their group chat, innocuously named Northgate Moms, lit up with a flurry of messages. Seriously? How did that happen? I thought Ashley had it in the bag. Brenda's reply was cool and measured. It's a situation. We may need to handle it. To the outside observer, their reaction might have seemed puzzling. Micaiah was by any objective measure a model student. But her excellence was precisely the problem. In their eyes, Micaiah was an interloper, a disruption to the established social order. The title of prom queen in their carefully curated world was meant for a certain kind of girl, a legacy, someone whose family had been a part of the town's fabric for generations. It was meant for a girl like Ashley. Brenda and her friends would never have admitted even to themselves that race was a factor. Theirs was a more insidious brand of prejudice, cloaked in the language of concern and standards. They spoke in code, using words like fit and appropriateness, and the kind of image we want for the school. They saw Micaiah's popularity not as a testament to her character, but as a threat to their own children's status. The nomination was a match, and Brenda van der Zee was standing over a puddle of gasoline. She picked up her phone and made a call to a friend on the school board, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. "Hi, Eleanor. It's Brenda. I have a rather delicate question about the prom court selection process. I'm just a little worried that we're not properly vetting the candidates for their overall character. The first move had been made. The game had begun. And in the bright, bustling hallways of Northgate High, Micaiah, Johnson continued to smile, completely unaware of the storm that was gathering just for her. The campaign against Micaiah started not with a bang, but with a series of carefully orchestrated whispers. Brenda van der Zee was a master of a certain kind of warfare, one fought in the margins of PTA meetings, in hushed phone calls, and over lattes at the town's trendiest cafe. She knew that a direct attack would be seen as crude, and worse, could backfire. The key was to create an atmosphere of doubt, to subtly poison the well of public opinion, until it seemed perfectly reasonable, even necessary, to take action against Micaiah. Her first step was to dig for dirt. She dispatched her network of concerned parents to scour Micaiah's history at Northgate, searching for any misstep, any infraction, no matter how minor. For a week they came up empty. Micaiah's record was pristine. She had perfect attendance, stellar grades, and glowing teacher recommendations. She'd never even had a detention. Brenda was frustrated, but undeterred. "Everyone has something," she insisted to Carol in a hushed conversation in the parking lot of the yoga studio. "We just haven't found it yet." The break they were looking for came from an unlikely source, a disgruntled janitor who had a grudge against the school administration over a pay dispute. Carol's husband, the real estate developer, had some dealings with the janitors' union and made a call. For a small consulting fee, the janitor recalled an incident from months earlier in the fall. It was, in truth, a non-event. Micaiah and a group of her friends, excited after a decisive win at a home football game, had used colored chalk paint, the temporary washable kind, to decorate the senior parking lot with celebratory slogans like "Go Vikings" and "Seniors 25. They had even drawn a caricature of the school mascot. It was a harmless, spirited prank, the kind of thing high school students had been doing for decades. The next morning, the school's maintenance crew had simply hosed it off. No damage was done, no formal complaint was filed, and no students were ever identified or disciplined. It was forgotten by everyone, a fleeting moment of youthful exuberance. But in Brenda van der Zee's hands, this harmless prank became a weapon. She reframed the incident with a sinister spin. It was no longer chalk paint. It was vandalism and defacement of school property. The fact that it was washable was a detail she conveniently omitted. Her whispering campaign kicked into high gear. She started with the school's principal, Mr. Thompson. Arthur Thompson was a man on the verge of retirement, a bureaucrat whose primary goal was to avoid controversy and coast smoothly to his pension. He was conflict-averse, easily swayed by influential parents, and terrified of making waves. Brenda scheduled a meeting with him, arriving with Sarah in tow for moral support. She presented her case with an air of grave concern. "Arthur, we're worried," she began, her voice low and serious. "We've been hearing things about one of the prom queen nominees, Micaiah Johnson. We understand she was involved in an act of vandalism on school grounds earlier this year." Thompson looked flustered. "Vandalism? I don't recall any such incident." "The chalk paint in the senior lot," Brenda said, her eyes narrowing slightly. "I understand no one was formally disciplined, which is a concern in itself. It sets a bad precedent. But the larger issue, Arthur, is what it says about a student's character. The prom queen is a representative of Northgate High. She is a role model. Should that title really go to someone who has shown such a blatant disregard for school property?" Thompson stammered, shuffling papers on his desk. "Well, I believe that was just some students having fun. There was no permanent damage." "That's not the point," Sarah chimed in, taking her cue from Brenda. "The point is the decision-making, the judgment. We entrust these students with leadership roles, and we expect them to demonstrate a higher standard of behavior." They talked in circles, using loaded words like integrity, accountability, and school values. They never once mentioned race, but the subtext was thick and suffocating. They were painting a picture of Micaiah as a renegade, a troublemaker, a girl who was not one of them. They were skillfully playing on Thompson's fear of the powerful, wealthy parents who could make his life difficult. By the end of the 30-minute meeting, the seed of doubt had been firmly planted. Thompson, wanting only for the problem to go away, promised to look into it. Next, Brenda and her clique began to work on the other parents, and through them the students. The story of the vandalism spread, morphing and twisting with each retelling. On the sidelines of a soccer game, it was said that Micaiah had led a gang of students. In the checkout line at the grocery store, the story was that she had used permanent paint and caused thousands of dollars in damages. The truth didn't matter. The narrative did. Makia began to notice a shift in the school's atmosphere. A few students who had always been friendly now averted their gaze in the hallway. A teacher who had once praised her work now seemed distant and cool. She couldn't put her finger on what was wrong, but the feeling of unease was palpable. "Did I do something?" she asked her best friend Maya one afternoon. "People are acting weird." Maya, who was fiercely loyal, shook her head. "It's not you. It's them. I heard Ashley Van der Zee telling people you got in trouble for vandalizing the parking lot. It's ridiculous." Makia was stunned. "The chalk paint from last semester, that was a bunch of us and it washed right off. Why is anyone even talking about that?" "Because Ashley wants to be prom queen," Maya said, her voice laced with contempt. "And her mother is a snake." That evening, Makia told her mother what she had heard. Victoria listened patiently, her expression growing harder with each word. The vague unease she had felt for years about Northgate's undercurrent of prejudice was now crystallizing into a cold, hard anger. This wasn't about chalk paint. This was an attack on her daughter's character, a deliberate attempt to tarnish her reputation. "This is what they do," Victoria said, her voice calm but steely. "When they can't compete on merit, they resort to slander. They invent a problem and then demand a solution that benefits them. Don't you worry, baby. We are not going to let them get away with this." Victoria knew she couldn't fight whispers with whispers. She needed to confront the issue head-on. The next morning, she called Principal Thompson's office to schedule a meeting. The secretary, who had always been warm and friendly, was suddenly formal and evasive. The earliest appointment she could offer was for the following week. Victoria hung up the phone, a knot of frustration tightening in her stomach. She knew a delay tactic when she saw one. They were trying to stall to let the rumors fester and do their damage. The gaslighting was in full effect. A problem that they had invented was now being treated as a legitimate issue, and the victim was being made to feel like the perpetrator. The battle lines were being drawn. The whispers had done their work, creating a foundation of lies. Now Brenda Van der Zee and her allies were ready for the next phase of their plan to codify their prejudice into official school policy. The following week was a masterclass in bureaucratic warfare. While Victoria waited for her appointment with Principal Thompson, Brenda Van der Zee and her allies moved with chilling efficiency. They didn't need a public forum. Their influence operated best in the quiet, unobserved spaces where decisions were really made. Brenda's first target was the Prom Committee. It was officially a student-run body, but it had a faculty advisor. Ms. Albright, a mousy, insecure English teacher who was easily intimidated. Brenda leveraging her position as a major donor to the school's arts program, a donation she made sure to remind Ms. Albright of, called for an emergency review of the prom court selection criteria. The meeting took place not in a classroom, but in the school's formal conference room, a space usually reserved for school board meetings. Brenda Carroll and Sarah attended as concerned parent representatives. They laid out their case not as an attack on Makia, but as a necessary measure to uphold the integrity of school traditions. "We just feel," Brenda said, her voice smooth as silk, "that the honor of being on the prom court should be reserved for students who have demonstrated exemplary character throughout their entire senior year. It should be a reflection of their overall conduct, not just their popularity." She proposed a new addition to the prom guidelines, a single paragraph that would come to be known as the character clause. It stated that any nominee for prom court must have a spotless disciplinary record for the duration of the academic year, and must not have been involved in any incidents of misconduct, including but not limited to the defacement of school property or other acts of insubordination. The clause was retroactive, a legal absurdity in any other context, but in the closed world of Northgate High, it was a precision-guided missile aimed directly at Makia Johnson. The vandalism incident, once a non-issue, had now been laundered through the committee and was about to become official policy. Miss Albright, seeing the powerful parents arrayed before her, and no doubt thinking of the grant that funded her beloved Shakespeare Festival, quickly acquiesced. The student members of the committee, mostly juniors and a few seniors, who were friends of Ashley van der Zee, were railroaded into voting yes. It was all framed as a positive step, a way to make the honor mean more. Any flicker of dissent was quickly extinguished by the overwhelming pressure to agree. The clause was passed unanimously. When Victoria and Micaiah finally had their meeting with Principal Thompson, the trap had already been sprung. They walked into his office expecting a conversation, a chance to clear the air. Instead, they were met with a formal, almost judicial proceeding. Principal Thompson was not alone. He had Miss Albright with him, and a copy of the newly amended Prom guidelines sat on the desk between them. "Victoria Micaiah, thank you for coming in." Thompson began, avoiding eye contact. "We wanted to discuss a matter regarding the Prom Court nominations. As you know, the Prom Committee recently ratified a new clause regarding the character and conduct of nominees." He slid the paper across the desk. Victoria read the paragraph, her eyes narrowing. She saw it instantly for what it was, a sham, a legalistic smokescreen for raw prejudice. "Arthur, you can't be serious," Victoria said, her voice dangerously quiet. "You're applying a rule retroactively to an incident that wasn't even an incident. There was no investigation, no disciplinary action, no damage. You are creating a crime after the fact, to punish my daughter for being nominated." "Now, Victoria, let's not be dramatic," Thompson said, his voice taking on a patronizing tone. "These are the rules. They apply to everyone equally." "Equally." Makia spoke for the first time, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "How is it equal when the rule was written specifically for me?" "Everyone knows this is about the chalk. Why are you doing this?" Ms. Albright shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Makia, the committee felt it was important that the Prom Court represents the very best of Northgate, and I'm not that," Makia shot back. "My grades, my activities, my volunteer work, none of that matters because of some washable paint, because Ashley van der Zee's mother wants her to be queen." The accusation hung in the air, raw and undeniable. Thompson's face flushed a deep red. "That is an unfair accusation. The van der Zees are respected members of this community. This is about policy, not personalities." It was a brick wall. Every logical argument Victoria made was met with a bland recitation of the rules. Every emotional appeal from Makia was dismissed as an overreaction. They were trapped in a Kafkaesque nightmare where the process was the punishment. The meeting ended with Thompson delivering the final devastating blow. "Based on the new guidelines," he said, reading from a prepared statement, as if he were a judge delivering a verdict, "and your admitted involvement in the incident, from last October the committee has no choice but to rule you ineligible for the Prom Court. I'm very sorry." Makia stared at him, her heart sinking. It wasn't just about the title anymore. It was about the crushing, humiliating injustice of it all. They had conspired against her, twisted the rules, and lied to her face. They had made her feel small and powerless. Victoria stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. She placed a protective hand on Makia's shoulder. Her expression was no longer angry. It was cold, hard, and utterly determined. She looked directly at Principal Thompson, her gaze so intense he physically recoiled. "You're not sorry, Arthur," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "You're a coward. You have allowed a handful of bitter racist women to hijack this school's integrity to soothe their own fragile egos. You've taught my daughter a valuable lesson today, that the systems you're supposed to trust can be corrupted by weakness and prejudice. But I'm about to teach you a lesson. You have no idea who you're dealing with." They walked out of the office, leaving Thompson and Albright in a stunned silence. In the hallway, Makia finally broke down the tears she had been holding back, streaming down her face. "I don't even want to go anymore," she sobbed. "What's the point? They've ruined it." Victoria pulled her into a fierce hug, right there in the sterile beige corridor of Northgate High. "Yes, they have," she whispered into her daughter's hair. "They've ruined their prom, so we're going to have our own." Makia looked up, confused. "What are you talking about?" A slow, dangerous smile spread across Victoria Johnson's face. An idea born of rage and a lifetime of professional expertise was beginning to form. "They wanted to ban you from the prom," she said. "Fine. There isn't going to be a prom to be banned from." The drive home from the school was thick with a tense silence. Makia stared out the window, the picturesque streets of Northgate looking alien and hostile. Victoria, however, was no longer stewing in anger. Her mind, honed by years of crisis management and high-stakes event planning, was whirring. The initial shock had burned away, leaving behind the cold, clear focus of a strategist. "They think they've won," Victoria said, breaking the silence. Her voice was calm, analytical. "They used their system, their rules, their influence. They think the game is over." "It feels like it is," Makia mumbled, her voice still thick with tears. "No, baby," Victoria replied, turning onto their street. "They just revealed their strategy. Now we use ours. My world has rules too. And my rules are about contracts, logistics, and money. And in that world, I'm the one with the power." That evening, while Makia sought refuge in her room, talking quietly with her closest friends, Victoria transformed her elegant dining room into a command center. She pulled out her laptop, her Rolodex of contacts, and poured herself a glass of wine. The first thing she needed to know was every single detail about the Northgate High Senior Prom. She started with a simple Google search. The prom's theme, "A Night in the Cosmos," was splashed across the school's website, along with the date and time. And most importantly, the venue, the Starlight Ballroom. Victoria's eyebrows shot up. A flicker of a plan began to ignite. The Starlight Ballroom was not school property. It was one of the premier event venues in the county, a beautifully restored Art Deco masterpiece with a grand ballroom, sweeping staircase, and a reputation for impeccable service. Victoria knew it well. She had hosted several events there over the years and had a professional, if not personal, relationship with its owner, a shrewd but fair old-school businessman named Mr. Sal Russo. This was a critical piece of information. The school didn't have total control. They were clients just like any other. And clients operated under the terms of a contract. Victoria's next step was to get her hands on that contract. This required a more delicate touch. She couldn't just call the school and ask for it. But she didn't have to. She had other avenues. She called a friend, a lawyer who specialized in municipal contracts, and explained the situation in broad strokes. "I need to know the standard terms for a school district booking a private venue, specifically cancellation clauses and exclusivity." While her friend did some digging, Victoria did her own reconnaissance. She called a contact who worked for a major catering company that was a preferred vendor for the Starlight Ballroom. Posing as a prospective client, she made casual inquiries about booking a large event on short notice. "I have a client, a tech company looking to throw a last-minute spring gala," she said, her voice the epitome of professional charm. "I know it's a long shot, but what's the availability like at the Starlight over the next month?" The caterer, eager for a potential commission, was happy to help. "It's tight, Victoria, you know how it is. But let me see. The big one I know is the Northgate High Prom on the 24th. That takes the whole place." "Right, of course, the prom," Victoria said, feigning disappointment. "They must have booked that ages ago. Solid contract, I assume." "Oh, for sure," the caterer replied. "Though you know Sal, he's old school. His contracts are pretty straightforward. Big deposit, but the final payment isn't due until 2 weeks before the event. And his buyout clause is legendary. If someone comes along and offers to pay the full fee plus a premium, the original client has 48 hours to match the offer, or they lose the date. He's had it happen a couple of times with corporate clients trying to one-up each other." Victoria could have kissed him. It was the loophole she was dreaming of. A high-stakes, high-risk maneuver, but a possible one. Her lawyer friend called back an hour later, confirming what the caterer had said. School contracts with private venues were surprisingly insecure. Districts were often unwilling to pay the full amount up front, leaving them vulnerable to clauses just like the one Mr. Russo was famous for. The plan solidified in her mind, audacious and brilliant. She wasn't just going to throw an alternative prom, she was going to take their prom away. The next morning, Victoria Johnson dressed for battle. She chose a sharp, tailored power suit in a deep burgundy, projecting an aura of unshakable confidence. She called Mr. Russo's office and requested an immediate in-person meeting, citing a time-sensitive business proposition. She was shown into Sal Russo's office, a room decorated with dark wood, leather-bound books and framed photos of him with various local dignitaries. Mr. Russo, a man in his late 60s with a full head of silver hair and eyes that had seen it all, greeted her with a firm handshake. "Victoria, good to see you. My secretary said it was urgent." "It is Sal," she said, sitting down opposite him. "I'm here to talk about the night of May 24th. He raised an eyebrow. "Northgate's prom. Booked solid." "I know," she said, "and I want to buy it out." Russo leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. He recognized the look in her eyes. This wasn't just business. It was personal. "That's a very expensive proposition," he said. "Their contract is for $50,000. The buyout clause requires you to offer the full amount plus a 25% premium. You're talking about $62,500 to cancel a high school dance." "I am," Victoria said, not flinching, "and I need to do it today." Russo steepled his fingers, studying her. "The school gets 48 hours to match your offer. If they come up with the money, you're out of luck." "They won't," Victoria said with absolute certainty. "Their final payment isn't due for another week. They won't have the funds authorized, and they won't have the political will to call an emergency school board meeting to approve that kind of expenditure just to spite a parent. They'll assume it's a bluff." "And why are you doing this, Victoria?" he asked, his curiosity piqued. "It's a lot of money to make a point." Victoria took a deep breath. She decided to tell him the truth, editing out the raw emotion and presenting it as a simple, infuriating case of injustice. She told him about Micaiah's nomination, the whispering campaign, the manufactured vandalism story, and the retroactive character clause designed to disqualify her daughter. As she spoke, Rousseau's expression hardened. He was a businessman, but he was also a grandfather. He had built his reputation on fairness and had no patience for bullies. "They put this in writing?" he asked, his voice low. "The clause, yes. The reason, no." That was all done with winks and nods in the principal's office. Rousseau was silent for a long moment. He looked at the photo of his own granddaughters on his credenza. He looked back at Victoria, at the fierce, protective fire in her eyes. "My daughter cried her eyes out yesterday." "Sal," Victoria said softly, "they made her feel worthless over a title. They humiliated her because they couldn't stand to see her shine. 50,000, 60,000. You can't put a price on your child's dignity. But it seems I can put a price on their prom." Rousseau stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the street below. "The contract is the contract," he said, turning back to her. "The clause is clear. If you can provide a certified check for the full amount by the end of the day, I will be legally obligated to present the school with the buyout notice. They will have until Friday at 5 p.m. to match it. If they do not, the venue is yours." He extended his hand. "It seems, Victoria," he said, a glint of admiration in his eyes, "that you are about to host a party." Victoria shook his hand, a wave of triumphant adrenaline washing over her. She walked out of the Starlight Ballroom and went straight to her bank. The check was certified an hour later. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, an official notice was delivered by courier to Principal Thompson's office. The bomb had been planted, the fuse was lit, and Northgate High had 48 hours to figure out what hit them. The arrival of the courier at Northgate High was an unremarkable event. The notice, sealed in a crisp legal envelope, was placed in Principal Thompson's incoming tray. He didn't open it until the end of the school day, assuming it was a routine vendor communication. He read it once, his eyes scanning the dense legalistic text. He read it a second time, the words slowly penetrating the fog of his administrative complacency. He read it a third time, and a sickening dread washed over him. The Starlight Ballroom. Buyout clause. A certified check for $62,500 from a private citizen. 48 hours to match. His first thought was that it had to be a mistake, a prank. He called Mr. Rousseau's office, his hand trembling slightly. Rousseau himself took the call. "Sal Arthur Thompson here. I've just received a very strange notice regarding our prom booking." "It's no mistake, Arthur." Rousseau's voice was flat professional. "I have a certified check in my safe. The offer is real. You have until Friday at 5. "But who would do this?" "Why?" Thompson sputtered. "The client wishes to remain anonymous for now," Rousseau said coolly. "I'm just the messenger, Arthur. The contract is clear." He hung up. Thompson sank into his chair, the blood draining from his face. The anonymous client. A private citizen. It took him only a few seconds to connect the dots. The disastrous meeting. Victoria Johnson's final chilling words. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." Panic set in. He immediately called Brenda van der Zee. "We have a problem," he said, his voice a panicked whisper. "A huge problem." He explained the situation. Brenda was, for the first time in a long time, speechless. The sheer audacity of the move was beyond anything she had conceived. She had been playing checkers, and Victoria Johnson had just overturned the entire chessboard. "She can't do that," Brenda finally shrieked into the phone. "She already has," Thompson moaned. "We have to match the offer. $62,000 by Friday." The reality of the situation crashed down on Brenda. The school budget was locked. There was no discretionary fund for something like this. Getting that kind of money would require an emergency meeting of the full school board and the district finance committee. It would mean public exposure. She would have to stand up in a public forum and argue for spending an exorbitant amount of taxpayer money to secure a specific venue for a dance, all because of a feud she had started. The story would come out. The character clause. The targeting of Makia. Her carefully constructed facade of concerned parent would crumble, revealing the ugly prejudice beneath. Her scheme, built on whispers and shadows, could not survive the harsh light of public scrutiny. "That's impossible," she said, her voice hollow. "We can't do that." "Then we're going to lose the venue," Thompson said, his voice cracking. "Brenda, the prom is in 10 days. News travels fast in a high school. By the next morning, the rumor was everywhere, spreading through text messages and social media like wildfire. Prom is cancelled." The initial disbelief gave way to chaos. Seniors who had already bought expensive dresses and rented tuxedos were in an uproar. Underclassmen who had been invited as dates were confused. Parents were irate. Principal Thompson's office was flooded with calls. He was forced to make a school-wide announcement, trying to downplay the situation. He spoke in vague terms about a contractual issue and unforeseen circumstances, assuring everyone that they were exploring alternative venues. But there were no alternative venues. Brenda and her cronies, in a desperate attempt to save face, spent the next 48 hours frantically calling every hotel, ballroom, country club, and event hall within a 50-mile radius. They were met with a series of polite but firm rejections. This was the second, more subtle part of Victoria's plan, executed with the help of a discreet word from Saul Rousseau. He hadn't blacklisted the school, not officially, but he had made a few calls to his colleagues in the local event industry. He told them a story of a mother defending her daughter from a vicious, racially motivated smear campaign. The venue owners, a tight-knit community, were appalled. They wanted no part of Northgate's drama. They suddenly found their calendars were fully booked. The hard karma was hitting Brenda van der Zee with the force of a freight train. Her phone rang incessantly with calls from furious parents demanding answers. Her daughter Ashley was being ostracized at school, blamed for the catastrophe. The crown she had so desperately coveted was now a symbol of her mother's spectacular failure. At a tense meeting of their little clique, Carol and Sarah began to distance themselves, their loyalty evaporating now that Brenda's power had proven to be a mirage. She was a pariah, her social standing in tatters. On Friday, at 4:45 p.m., a defeated Principal Thompson called Mr. Rousseau and officially relinquished the date. The Starlight Ballroom now belonged to Victoria Johnson. The school was forced to announce the unthinkable. The Northgate Senior Prom was being relocated to the school gymnasium. The Night in the Cosmos theme was now a cruel joke. Instead of a grand ballroom with crystal chandeliers, they would have basketball hoops and a scuffed wooden floor. The caterer loyal to Mr. Rousseau pulled out, leaving them with a last-minute scramble that resulted in lukewarm pizza and soda in plastic cups. The humiliation was absolute. But for Victoria and Micaiah, the victory was just beginning. That evening, Victoria created a private Instagram account. The first post was a simple, elegant digital invitation. It read, "You are cordially invited to the People's Prom, a celebration of everyone. No clauses, no committees, just music, dancing, and respect. Saturday, May 24th, the Starlight Ballroom. All are welcome." The invitation was sent to Micaiah's friends, who then sent it to their friends. It spread organically, a counter-narrative of inclusion and rebellion. It was sent to the students who had always felt a little on the outside, to the kids in the art club and the drama society, to the athletes who respected Micaiah's integrity, and to every student who was disgusted by the administration's spinelessness and Brenda's bigotry. The response was overwhelming. The official prom had become a symbol of everything wrong with their school's culture. The people's prom, held at the original coveted venue, became the place to be. It was the ultimate act of defiance, a party that was also a protest. The tables hadn't just been turned. They had been smashed to pieces and rebuilt into something better. The night of May 24th was cool and clear, with a brilliant canopy of stars that seemed to have been personally ordered by Victoria Johnson. This celestial backdrop offered a cruel irony to the scene unfolding at Northgate High, where the official Night in the Cosmos prom was dying a slow, pathetic death in the school gymnasium. The cavernous space, which usually echoed with the squeak of sneakers and the roar of the crowd, was eerily quiet. A single sad disco ball spun listlessly from a basketball hoop, casting anemic specks of light across a mostly empty, scuffed wooden floor. The ambitious Cosmos theme had been reduced to a few dozen silver and black balloons clinging to the bleachers, and some star-shaped confetti wilting on formica tables, the air thick with the scent of stale popcorn and institutional floor wax was heavy with resentment. In the center of this miserable tableau stood Brenda van der Zee, her face a rigid mask of forced cheerfulness. She was flanked by her husband, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. Between them was their daughter Ashley, a tragic figure in a couture gown that cost more than the entire budget for this disaster. The dress, meant for a grand ballroom staircase, looked garish and out of place against the faded blue paint of the gym walls. Ashley's expression was one of pure, unadulterated misery. She was a princess imprisoned in the 5-star dungeon her mother had built for her. Only a few dozen students had shown up, mostly out of parental obligation or a morbid curiosity to witness the train wreck firsthand. They stood in awkward, silent clumps, scrolling through their phones, which were all lit up with images and videos from the real party happening across town. The caterer's last-minute replacement had provided stacks of greasy pizza boxes and coolers full of lukewarm soda, a final insult to the seniors who had been dreaming of this night for 4 years. "Isn't this festive?" Brenda said, her voice straining to sound upbeat as she adjusted a wilting balloon bouquet. A passing student shot her a look of pure contempt. "Sure, Mrs. van der Zee, if you're into sad, empty rooms." The barb hit its mark. Brenda flinched as if struck. Later there would be a perfunctory crowning ceremony where Ashley would be given her plastic tiara under the unforgiving glare of the gymnasium's fluorescent lights. But everyone knew it was a hollow victory, a crown of ashes. The real event, the heart and soul of the senior class, was miles away, shining with the light of 1,000 suns. The scene at the Starlight Ballroom was its polar opposite, a supernova of joy. Victoria Johnson hadn't just secured the venue. She had transformed it into a breathtaking celestial wonderland that the original prom committee could only have dreamed of. Guests entered through an archway of intertwined silver branches and twinkling fairy lights, stepping into a world of midnight blue and deep purple silks that draped from the 20-foot ceilings. A state-of-the-art sound system, helmed by one of the city's hottest DJs, pumped out a beat that was primal and infectious, a rhythm you could feel in your bones. The gourmet food bar was a sight to behold, a cornucopia of culinary delights, ranging from delicate sushi rolls to gourmet sliders and a chocolate fountain that drew a constant, delighted crowd. But the most incredible part, the true measure of Victoria's triumph, was the people. Hundreds of students had come, a vibrant, diverse tapestry of Northgate High. They had come not just from the senior class, but from all grades, a united front of defiance. There were lacrosse jocks in sharp tuxedos laughing with theatre kids in thrift store vintage suits. Student council members who had felt powerless in the face of the administration were now dancing freely alongside kids with punk rock haircuts and piercings. It was a coalition of the kind, the cool and the conscientious. They had all made a choice to be here, to cast their vote with their feet, to make a stand by having the time of their lives. At the center of it all was Makia. She was breathtaking, wearing a stunning custom-designed gown the color of a midnight sky, intricately embroidered with constellations of tiny, glittering crystals. But the dress was merely an accessory to the radiant, confident joy that emanated from her. The past few weeks had been a crucible forging her in fire, and she had emerged stronger, more self-assured and deeply humbled by the community that had rallied around her. She moved through the crowd not as a nominee in a contest, but as a beloved friend, a gracious hostess, and the undisputed leader of this beautiful rebellion. Her mother, Victoria, stood near the grand staircase, a glass of champagne in hand, watching the scene unfold. She wasn't just a proud mother tonight. She was a queen in her own court, the masterful architect of this defiant celebration. Mr. Russo, the ballroom's owner, sidled up beside her. "You did good, Victoria," he said, his voice full of genuine admiration as he surveyed the joyous chaos. "Real good." "We did good," she corrected him with a warm smile, gesturing to the vibrant crowd. Halfway through the night, the music faded and the lights came up on the stage. Maya Makia's fiercely loyal best friend stepped up to the microphone. "Hey everyone," she shouted, and a massive cheer reverberated through the ballroom. "I think we can all agree this is the only prom that matters tonight, and a prom isn't a prom without a queen. But we don't need a corrupt committee or a bogus character clause to choose ours. We just need to recognize the person whose character is so strong, whose light is so bright that it brought us all together. The person who faced down the haters with grace and strength, who reminds us what true leadership looks like. Let's hear it for our friend, our inspiration, Makia Johnson." The roar was deafening, a physical wave of sound born of pure love and admiration. Makia's friends escorted her to the stage, her eyes glistening with happy tears as she looked out at the sea of faces. There was no cheap plastic tiara waiting for her. Instead, Maya gently placed a delicate, handcrafted crown of woven silver stars on her head. Makia took the microphone, taking a deep, steadying breath. "Thank you," she began, her voice clear and strong. "A few weeks ago, I thought I knew what prom was supposed to be about. A perfect night, a perfect dress, a silly title. But they tried to take that away. And in doing so, they gave all of us something so much better." She paused, looking out at her classmates. "They wanted to make me feel small. They wanted to make me feel like I didn't belong. But look around this room. Look at what we created. This isn't about me. It's about all of us who have ever been made to feel like an outsider. It's about showing up for each other. It's about knowing that when people try to dim your light, you don't waste your time arguing with them in the dark. You build a bigger, brighter stage, and you invite everyone you know to come and shine with you. This isn't my crown. It's ours. This is the people's prom." The crowd erupted again, a unified roar of triumph, and the DJ dropped the beat. The rest of the night was a glorious blur of dancing laughter and pure unadulterated joy. The fallout from the tale of 2 proms echoed through Northgate for months. The story became a local legend, a cautionary tale about the arrogance of power. An investigative reporter from the county newspaper, tipped off by a very pleased Mr. Russo, wrote a scathing front-page exposé titled "A Tale of 2 Proms: How Prejudice and Cowardice Tarnished Northgate's Crown." Principal Thompson, facing a vote of no confidence from the teachers' union and unbearable public pressure, announced his early retirement at the end of the school year. He was last seen packing his office into a cardboard box, a defeated man haunted by his own weakness. Brenda van der Zee's karma was swift and merciless. Her social exile was absolute. At the town's annual charity gala, a woman she'd known for years turned her back on her mid-sentence. Her invitations to board meetings and fundraisers evaporated. Her friends, including Carol and Sarah, now crossed the street to avoid her. One afternoon, Ashley, home from a miserable first semester at a college she hadn't wanted, found her mother weeping in the kitchen. "This is your fault," Ashley said, her voice cold and dead. "You wanted a crown so badly. You ruined my life." Months later, the "For Sale" sign on their perfect lawn served as a final karmic indictment of a woman who had tried to hoard power and ended up with nothing. Makia, meanwhile, thrived. She went off to her first-choice university, that fall not just with a portfolio of academic awards, but with the invaluable, hard-won knowledge that true power isn't about titles or status. It's about integrity, community, and the courage to build your own stage. And it helps, she would often joke to her new friends, to have a mother who knows how to buy out the venue. This story is a powerful reminder that the fight against injustice doesn't always happen in a courtroom. Sometimes it happens in a ballroom. Victoria and Micaiah Johnson didn't just win. They rewrote the rules and created a new kind of victory, one built on community courage and a mother's unbreakable love. They turned an act of exclusion into the most inclusive event of the year. Their story proves that the most powerful response to prejudice is not anger, but audacious, brilliant, and joyful success. If this story inspired you, please hit that like button to help us share it with more people. Don't forget to click subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story of triumph and karma. And we want to hear from you. Share your own stories of standing up to injustice in the comments below. Thank you for watching.